Well, Rick Santelli in 2009 was shouting that about the payoff of mortgages, and now former advisor to President Obama, Steve Ratner, talking about this. There are supporters of this. Democrats are supporting the president, maybe not full-throated, but they are. Do this and move on. Let's bring in our panel. Josh Kraushaar, Axios senior political correspondent, Leslie Marshall, Democratic strategist, and syndicated radio host Hugh Hewitt. Hugh, first to you, big picture on this move and the blowback we're seeing.
Well, the first thing that Ron DeSantis told me about it this morning, Brett, I think is the most important. It's unconstitutional for the president to take this action. But after that, it's bad policy. It's a bailout for bad behavior. It's very perverse incentives for people to borrow and not expect to pay. The worst of all, the politics are just terrible. It's like Team Biden never misses a chance to do a faceplant on their momentum. And the best giveaway from that is Tim Ryan earlier in the show tonight, distancing himself. He's a congressman running for Senate in Ohio, and he wants no part of this because he's got blue-collar workers who never went to college. He's got soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who went on the GI Bill after they served. They got parents who saved and mortgaged. They've got kids who went to JC for 2 years. They've got kids who worked through college, kids who didn't get scholarships. It's just a terrible political witch's brew.
Leslie, a lot of the pushback I heard from Democrats today had to do with the hypocrisy, a version of whataboutism, dealing with the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program during COVID that gave a lot of people, including Republican lawmakers who are business owners, checks, paychecks. And they're saying, if you didn't have a problem with that, why do you have a problem with this? A couple of things. One, school loans are a choice. And two, Congress passed the PPP, the Senate and the House did. And three, the PPP was a result of government action that shut America down, that essentially said everything is stopping. Student loans seem like a different animal. Is that fair?
Somewhat. I would agree with your last point, but the first point about choice, PPP is a choice, and we also know that not all PPP was truly forgiven, and you had a choice to pay it back. I think Joel Osteen is doing that right now after pushback from the community, even Christians inside and outside of that community. Look, at the end of the day, here's the hypocrisy from where I sit, Brett. The American people voted for Joe Biden. He said it, he tweeted it, this specific amount. Two, polls show the American people are in favor of this. Three, the American people pay for fish on a treadmill. People pay for our military who are pacifist. People pay within states for public schools who don't have children who go there. And people pay for interstate freeways even if they don't drive or never leave their state. I could go on and on and on, and I won't because of time. So there are a lot of things that, you know, our tax dollars pay for that we don't necessarily like or we don't necessarily partake of. And when people talk about politicizing, that's, I think, who's politicizing the right, and then Americans who forgot this is one of the things you elected the president to do, and in the polls you said you wanted this and this specific dollar amount.
I'm not sure everybody elected President Biden to do this. In fact, President Biden of old, kind of moderate, would be concerned about this, this move as an executive action, Josh. That's the thing. This is the largest executive action from a financial perspective that we have ever seen in this country, actually. And there are questions about whether it's constitutional that it didn't come from Congress at this dollar amount.
Yeah, this is the type of move that even Nancy Pelosi last year said wasn't within the president's power. That was just last year, and now she's falling in line behind the White House. But you know, even some of the more liberal lawmakers were wary about this type of plan. And Hugh mentioned Tim Ryan, who's in a red-leaning state of Ohio, where he opposed what the president did with the student loan forgiveness. But it's not just Ohio. It's Senator Cortez Masto in Nevada with a lot of young voters, a lot of Hispanic voters, and she apparently thinks it's too politically difficult to support this plan. It's Michael Bennet in Colorado, a blue state, where he came out against the plan. So you're hearing, I've been talking to Democratic strategists, Democratic officials who are worried about some of these vulnerable swing state, swing district members who were not on board with this level of forgiveness and wish that there was some kind of work requirement, something more moderate that they could actually get behind other than just bailing out upper middle class welfare.
Well, maybe the political answer is that they're going to get it overturned in some legal way, and the president can have the credit on the left with progressives saying he really tried, but he couldn't get it through. Who knows? Here's the education secretary. They're having a real problem answering straight-on questions. The White House press secretary did today. Here's the education secretary. We saw him with Peter Doocy yesterday. This is him today on CNN. And Hugh, the White House briefing was painful. The one thing that I'd want to go back to, and that is that they're using to do this is an emergency COVID authorization through the Secretary of Education, through the Department of Education. But it's the same administration that argued in court that Title 42 should be lifted along the border because the COVID emergency is over. And it's the same administration that has a CDC that is relaxing guidelines. And it's the same administration that has a big event with the president right now with a ton of people without masks. So it's kind of a strange argument.
It doesn't add up, or at least it adds up to zero. It negates itself in the telling. The president on September 9 is going to go to Ohio, where they're building a couple of Intel factories, and he's going to pop the cork on the bipartisan infrastructure bill and on the bipartisan CHIPS Act, which were passed by the Senate and the House and signed by the president. He can take a half a victory lap on that, along with Mike DeWine. But what you pointed out, the largest single executive action in American history, the minimum is $300 billion. The Penn-Wharton model says it might be $800 billion. It's inflationary. It's a tax on every American who does not get this bailout. And in a sad bit of irony, their website isn't working. It reminds us of Obamacare at the beginning, but at least Obamacare eventually worked. I don't think this will.
All right, I'm going to give you 10 seconds because you had a couple guys. Leslie, go ahead.
Well, a couple of things. If you show up for the party, you got to be prepared, and a reporter is going to ask you those questions. You got to have the dollar amounts because Americans can just Google that. Secondly, I think, Brett, you're onto something with your crystal ball about a court and the president going, "I tried."
All right. Thanks. Up next, the impending release of the Mar-a-Lago search warrant affidavit. What the panel thinks of that.
Mr. President, how much advance notice did you have of the FBI's plan to search Mar-a-Lago?
I didn't have any advance notice. None. Zero. Not one single
Okay,
bit.
we're going to see what happens tomorrow. That's the deadline, noon. Judge Reinhardt down in Florida saying today that he'll agree to redactions. He wrote in a statement, "I find that the government has met its burden of showing a compelling reason, good cause, to seal portions of the affidavit because disclosure would reveal, one, the identities of witnesses, law enforcement agents, and uncharged parties, and two, the investigation strategy, direction, scope, sources, and methods." The Wall Street Journal op-ed says Washington's Mar-a-Lago prosecution by leaks. Sorry, you'll get these redacted items that could look like this. We saw this in the Hunter Biden documents, the Fauci documents. That's what we could see. The Wall Street Journal, sorry about that. Washington's Mar-a-Lago prosecution by leaks. The Justice Department wants the search affidavit secret while details spill to the press. We're back with the panel. Josh, what do you make of this and the fallout from it? Obviously, tomorrow will shed some light or no light, depending on what we see.
I don't think it'll shed a whole lot of light. I think we'll learn some details about the justification for the search, but really the most politically explosive details are what is in those documents. What did Trump keep, the classified information? What are the national security secrets? How damaging was that to American national security? And I don't think that's going to be revealed. I think a lot of that information is going to be redacted. So it's going to be back to a political fight that's very partisan, and it's one that has fused the Republican base to Donald Trump in a way we haven't seen in many months. But you look at the NBC poll that was out this weekend. You look at something like the Gallup numbers. Trump's favorability rating is down. He's not winning the overall electorate. He's winning the base, but this is not favorable for his overall political outlook.
Yeah, the Trump team, Leslie, thinks they're winning in this battle. Time magazine, Trump revives impeachment playbook, says Trump's camp believes that convincing Reinhardt to release the FBI's affidavit amounts to a political victory over the Biden administration, but there's concern that the release version will be so heavily redacted that it obscures just how much the FBI knew before the search. It would be absolutely a win for Donald Trump, says Hogan Gidley, Trump's former White House deputy press secretary, still speaks with him, unless, of course, when it's released, the affidavit looks like Turn 4 at Talladega. A heavily blacked out version of the affidavit only paints a partial story, so says Gidley. That could make notable quotables if it was on camera, but what about this political back and forth, and we don't know what we don't know?
Honestly, I think it did and does kind of help Donald Trump. His base, or maybe his base, who were just kind of becoming a bit apathetic. So this is why I don't think it's politically motivated, because then the Democrats, the DOJ, who shouldn't be political, obviously, in the Biden administration, my side of the aisle, the Democrats, have helped Trump with this. But regarding what comes out, I think it's important to have this out. I also think it's essential to protect witnesses and law enforcement and not to infringe upon an ongoing investigation. You're looking at 3 potential criminal investigations within this, one of which being espionage. And I think the 2 things we're looking at here, if we can find anything with these redactions, is timeline and reasoning. And I think, quite frankly, the former president is going to spin it to his base as a negative and to victimize himself, and they're going to buy it because that's pretty much the playbook.
Yeah. Again, we don't know. We're going to stick to facts, what's in there or not in there. But the politics of this, Hugh, just a few minutes ago, President Biden said, not on camera, but said to a rally at DNC, what we're seeing now is the beginning or the death knell of an extreme MAGA philosophy. It's not just Trump. It's the entire philosophy that underpins the, I'm going to say something, it's like semi-fascism. Okay, now, here's the thing I don't understand, is he knows that 70 million plus people voted for Donald Trump in this past election. This thought process of calling the MAGA movement semi-fascism is really something. It's like Charlie Crist down in Florida, who says, I don't want your votes if you support Ron DeSantis. It's demonizing the people who voted for the policy and not the man. I don't get it.
I don't get using that term at all, Brett. I know that there are people on Twitter who will cheer that, but it just appalls, I think, the massive number of ordinary Americans defined as non-activists who don't make contributions and don't go to rallies, to see half the country deemed fascist or semi-fascist. I'd love to see if that was in the teleprompter, because I think it sounds like every time the president goes off script, he does something like this, and that will be a story tomorrow. But to your original question about Trump, this is the 7th year of the Get Trump show. And it's getting old. What I want to know is they went and they got the boxes. They know what they've got. I don't know why it's in the early stages of the investigation. They know whether or not he violated law in their view. Bring your case or shut up, DOJ. This you've now, I don't want sources and methods compromised, just like Leslie, just like Josh, just like you. But make your case or go away, because we don't need another 7 years of Get Trump.
Well, we're going to get to that point, and maybe we'll learn something tomorrow. Panel, thank you.